Hi, my name is Ryan O'Donnell, and welcome to the podcast. On today's episode, we will talk about the lives of crime and murder duo Dick Hickok and Perry Smith, who were hung in Kansas for the 1959 murder of the Clutter family, an average Midwestern farm family who were the pride of the town of Holcomb, Kansas. What makes the case of Dick and Perry's murder of the Clutter family so interesting is the method of how they conducted their murder. Rather than being ruthless, bloodthirsty killers, they actually treated their victims with respect and compassion, tucking some of the victims into their bed and putting them in a position where they would be comfortable. So we'll dive into their lives and see if their prior lives and experiences would have to do with their actions. So first of all, we need to talk about how Dick and Perry became the low-life criminals they were at the time of the crime, and how the experiences and environments they were exposed to in the past led them down this wrong path that eventually ended up in them becoming mass murderers. So basically, what I've gathered so far is that the early lives of Dick and Perry were very unfortunate, and their parts not really having to do with themselves, just the environments that they were put in. So to start, Dick Hickok, also known as Richard Hickok, was born in Kansas City, Kansas. He was actually a popular jock in high school, very popular among friends and just among the community. But he got into a car accident in 1950, and his face was disfigured, causing it to be asymmetric, and this is when his life really changed, and he became kind of the sadistic, natured person he was known as when he committed the crimes. So after that, he couldn't go to college due to his parents' lack of money, which just fueled the fire. He was married and divorced several times throughout his later life, and and then eventually he was forced into petty crime to make ends meet, as he didn't have really a good way to make money, and this is the reason he got imprisoned for 5 years, which is how he met Perry in jail. So, on the side of Perry was born in Huntington, Nevada, with 3 siblings. His parents were both rodeo performers. His dad was an abusive man, and his mom was an alcoholic. So Perry left his dad with his mom, they were living in Alaska, and they moved to San Francisco, leaving their dad behind as he was abusive, and they were trying to get away from that. And in San Francisco, his mom died due to alcohol poisoning. She's actually choking on her own vomit when Perry was only 13. So after this, he was put into 2 orphanages, one ran by a Catholic church, and one ran by the Salvation Army, and he was abused in both of these orphanages. So later, his brother and sister actually both killed themselves. So at this point, he had gone through so much that his mind was just like he was put in such a violent state, and that wasn't even at all. So his other sister completely cuts off all contact with him, not wanting to do anything with her old life, and which includes Perry. And he also got into a serious motorcycle accident. Which caused him to become addicted to aspirin after his time in the hospital. And finally, he was imprisoned for breaking and entering after the fact. He got out of the hospital and during his addiction stage. So I'd just like to add that despite what most people say, think, or feel about a murderer, they still are people, and they use logic, reasoning, and emotion when deciding on things. So I think the real issue in people like Dick and Perry is how these guidelines in the mind can be manipulated or swayed, and clearly in their cases they were, because it definitely takes some logic and reasoning. I mean, their reasoning behind their actions was that they were so desperate for money that they needed to murder this family just to make ends meet so that they could have some money in the bank, and then they were going to flee off to Mexico. So they clearly thought this out, and they thought it was a good idea to murder a whole family just so they could get some more money. So I really think that goes into like how they're still people. They're not like monsters. It really, like, what they went through could have changed them so much that they thought this was genuinely the right thing to do. So, something I think that's important to note about Dick and Perry that I think a lot of people don't pick up on is that their meeting in prison was a major factor in this murder ever taking place, or them possibly even ever becoming murderers, advancing basically above petty crime that they were used to. So basically, the dynamic of their relationship, especially from Perry to Dick, was trying to impress or please the other. So much so that Perry made up a story about beating someone he knew with a bike chain to impress Dick and make him think that he was tougher than he actually was. So these murders played into that dynamic, and I think personally that it helped bring the two together. And aside from obviously thinking that they would make money off of this and be able to live better lives in Mexico, where they were going to flee, I think it helped bring the two together and give them something to bond upon, as crazy as that sounds. So at this point, I'm still left with a few questions. So my main question was whether it is okay to blame Dick and Perry themselves for their crimes as people, or like just if it was up to their morals or not, or if it was the responsibility of their upbringing and environment. So it's really up to like the perspective of the viewer, but it could be seen either way. You could see it as Dick and Perry themselves. They're just another human like you and me, and they had all the ability to stop themselves from being full out murderers. I mean, petty crime is one thing, but to murder a family is another. But some people say that when you're brought up in such an environment like they were, that you almost can't help yourself and that you become other than what you and me are, just normal humans. So additionally, I also had another question, that did they ever have a good chance to live respectful lives given their conditions? So keeping in mind what they were going through in their lives, did they ever have a chance to live a normal life? Were they not given a chance because of their conditions? Were they never going to live this normal life? Were they bound or destined for this murder? So that basically ends this podcast. Next time on In Cold Blood, we're actually going to delve into the lives of the Clutter family, specifically those who actually survived the tragedy. And we're gonna talk about how they coped with the losses and how they continue to live on normally, because obviously the loss of the majority of your family isn't going to be easy for anyone, especially for people who are that young. And we're gonna see how they continue to live on to be respectful citizens. I mean, didn't grow up like Dick and Perry, and they didn't end up being murderers. So we'll dive into that a little bit. Thank you for listening.